Hello everyone, welcome to Audiobook 880. Today we're bringing you an incredible story, If God Was a Banker, by Ravi Subramanian. This audiobook will take you on an exciting journey where every moment comes alive through our narration. So grab your headphones, sit back, and let's dive into this captivating adventure together. New York. It was 5:45 a.m. on a Monday morning. New York City was dark and cold. Basin was yet to leave its heavenly abode. A few cars could be heard in the distance. Early risers who had to travel a long distance to work were making their way to office. Rang. Rang. Sundeep was wide awake, yet he could not hear the alarm bell go off. He hadn't slept the whole night. His eyes were tired but open. By this time he knew the entire topography of the Greco-Roman chandelier, which hung from the roof of his modern 5-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. He himself had no idea of how long he had been staring at it. The whole night, maybe. Numerous questions were flashing in his head. What would Natasha think of him? Will she accept him? What will the kids say? Sundeep, will you please turn it off? It was Natasha, his wife of 19 years. She had just woken up, her sleep disturbed by the constant ringing of the alarm. Sundeep stretched out his right hand and pressed the button on top of the alarm clock to stop the irritating buzz. Natasha went back to sleep almost instantly. She was normally the first to get up, but today was not a normal day. Sundeep hadn't slept at all. It was not the first time that Sundeep had been awake all night. Any other day, he would be the last to leave the dance floor at any party. He would breathe life into any gathering. His admirers said that Sundeep's parties began only after midnight. But today was not any other day. Today was indeed very different. There was no party tonight. Life could change dramatically for Sundeep in the next 8 hours. He was a worried man. It was only after 6 long hours that the Greco-Roman chandelier ceased being the center of Sundeep's attraction. He glanced to his left and looked at Natasha. She looked like an angel in her sleep. The silky linen added a heavenly touch. Even in sleep, her lips curled up in a delicate smile. Sundeep knew that Natasha had not the slightest clue about what awaited her before she would hit bed again on Monday night. Natasha was a bomb. Once a beauty queen, she had been attracted to the frail frame of Sundeep 20 years ago. Attracted to power, to fame, to adulation. Since then, she had become quite used to it all, and probably enjoyed it too. Of late, signs of age had begun to show on her face. Her skin had started withering. Slight wrinkles could be spotted on her forehead. But even today, only Ahmedkap could have suggested that she was a day older than 30. Sundeep had not told her anything till now. But he knew that this wouldn't last. Sooner or later, she would get to know. Should he tell her now and prepare her? Or should he tell her after everything was over? After the verdict was out? After all, he was a very senior guy, and there was just that small chance that he might get past the entire problem unscathed. But he knew it was extremely unlikely. Staring at the chandelier all night hadn't helped him make up his mind. He let out a deep sigh and stepped out of bed. His feet felt the exquisite texture of a Persian rug, imported from Tehran and gifted to Natasha on her 35th birthday by his NRI banking team. She was the wife of the business head, wasn't she? I will take a chance, he muttered under his breath. His mind was made. Natasha was not to be told. By 6:45 a.m., Sundeep had showered and got dressed in his impeccable pinstripes. He was wearing the red tie that Natasha had picked up for him from Harrods about 6 months ago when they had gone to London on a holiday, their last holiday together. Sundeep was lecturing at a leadership course in London and had taken Natasha with him. That was around the time his problems had deepened. Things hadn't improved since. He looked back over his shoulder. Natasha was still asleep. Sundeep walked up to her and kissed her on the cheek. Natasha smiled back. "Come back soon," she murmured, unmindful of the fact that he might be coming back for good. Sundeep turned and walked out of the room. On his way out, he glanced into his children's bedroom. Alka and Ajay, 6 and 7 years of age, were firmly tucked into their beds, fast asleep, unlikely to be up before 10. Schools were yet to reopen after the Christmas vacations, and they were in no hurry to go back to their classrooms. "God bless," muttered Sandeep as he made his way down the hallway to the garage, where his prized possession, a recently acquired BMW 9S, was parked. He would have to give it all up unless the gods decided to side with him today. But why would God even think of me? It suddenly struck him that he was thinking of God for the first time in he couldn't even remember how long. Even God needs to be spoken to, else he'll forget that you exist, his mom had once told him when she caught him running away from a puja at a family function. How he wished he had heeded her advice. Within 15 minutes, Sandeep's car pulled into the basement of the 62-storied building that housed the headquarters of New York International Bank, NYB, the world's fourth-largest financial services conglomerate. The moment they saw his car, the guards at the gate stood up and released the lever, activating the access-controlled door for a special floor that served as the parking lot for the group CEO and his direct reports. A reserved parking here marked one's arrival into the Ivy League of New York International Bank. Sandeep eased his car into the slot marked Managing Director Retail. This slot had become his when he moved into New York 12 months ago. Tom managed the retail business of New York International Bank in the emerging markets. The group CEO had handpicked him from a short list of 14 candidates across the bank. He got off his car, a beep signaling that the car had been locked. The same beep also activated a device in the parking lot, sending out a signal to his secretary on the 62nd floor that her boss was on his way. She would get about 3 minutes before her boss walked into the office. "Morning, Mr. Srivastava," said Louisa, as Sandeep stepped out of the express lift and took measured steps towards his cabin. A hot cup of black coffee without sugar was waiting for him on his table. Natasha had insisted that he cut down on his sugar intake. He was getting old and she wanted him to control his diet for better health. He had hardly settled into the plush leather chair when Louisa walked into his room. "Michelle called a couple of minutes before you arrived." "Thanks, Louisa. She has left a message for you. Mr. Bridge wants to meet you in the boardroom at 9:45. Thanks," was all that Sandeep managed to say. He could feel his heart sinking. His worst nightmare was about to come true. Ted Bridge was the group CEO of New York International Bank. If he wanted to meet Sandeep with Michelle, it spelt disaster for him. It was 8:30 and he still had 75 minutes before the scheduled meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to call on stage the winner of the Director's Gold Medal for the best all-round performance in the batch of 1986. A beaming M.R. Rao announced over the public address system. He was the dean at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, a premier MBA college in India. The occasion was the convocation for the outgoing batch of 180 students. Ratan Tata was handing out the degrees to the dreamy-eyed students who were embarking on a long and arduous journey into the corporate world. "Please put your hands together for Sandeep Srivastava." The moment Rao finished saying this, the audience erupted. Sandeep was very popular among his classmates and was liked by one and all. Son of an army major, Sandeep was fiercely combative. He typified the aspiring middle class in the country. The women in Sandeep's batch adored him. Without looks that would put Tom Cruise to shame, it was his aggression and intelligence that won him friends. Sandeep walked up to the stage with a swagger like Viv Richards. He exuded tremendous confidence while accepting the gold medal from Ratan Tata. Then, departing from laid-out protocol, Ratan Tata took the microphone. "Hey, young man. Congratulations on winning the Director's Gold Medal." "Thank you, sir. Sandeep, I am sure you have worked hard for this medal. How do you feel?" "Great. It's an honor. Winning this medal was very important for me. Did you think for a moment what you would have done had this medal gone to someone else?" "Pardon me, sir, but that option never existed. I play to win and not only for the spirit of the game," said Sandeep with the attitude of a veteran. "That's excellent, Sandeep. I like people who play to win. I am sure you will too. This attitude will take you a long way. Could you tell us what you aspire to achieve over the next 10 years? In the next decade?" asked Mr. Tata. I would like to be standing here and asking the same questions that you are." He was getting cheeky now. Everyone in the audience was shocked. Such impudence was very unlike Sundeep. "I am sure you will. Thank you, young man. Congratulations again." Mr. Tata, visibly embarrassed, cut short the discussion and handed the microphone back to Rao. This was the first time the world had got a taste of the real Sundeep. The Sundeep they had not seen till now. The successful Sundeep Srivastava had marked his arrival in style. In the mid-80s, banking in India was dominated by state-owned banks. These banks were slow and laid back. Customer service was not a word from their dictionary. Archaic technology, lack of customer-oriented processes, and antique products were their hallmark. Foreign banks were very small. They had very few branches and operated in a heavily regulated environment. Banking was synonymous with pinstripes-clad corporate bankers. Retail banking hadn't made its presence felt. The small individual customer was not on anybody's mind. These banks made so much money from large corporations that it was not worth their while to invest in building relationships and to run after small customers. No one in India even considered retail banking a viable option. Thaddeus, before New York International Bank, NYB, proved them all wrong. World over, banking had metamorphosed. Corporate banking had lost its sheen. Large corporations had started squeezing banks on margins, and the banks had little choice but to comply with the demands of these giants, or else exit the business. There were always 10 banks waiting at the doorsteps of the corporations, each willing to lend at rates lower than yours. Every bank worth its dime in the developed world had transitioned from servicing high-end corporates to higher-margin retail customers. Banks in India were slow to catch on. They were still running after the minuscule margins they were making on the large Tata and Birla companies. They couldn't see the change coming in at breakneck speed, and that's where New York International Bank saw a golden opportunity, decided to step in and fill the gap in the retail banking sector in this country. The NYB local management, however, was from the old school of thought. They were all corporate bankers, with no exposure outside the country. They had obvious reservations on the launch of retail banking. Convincing them was taking so long that NYB decided to hire a completely new team for this purpose. Retail banking needed a new aggression, and a thought process different from what was found in the world of Indian corporate banking. Aditya Rao moved from New York to India with a mandate to launch NYB's retail banking business in India. Aditya needed energy, passion, and drive in his team, and decided to hire fresh talent from premier institutes. It was thought that anyone from outside the banking industry would come in with new ideas that could redefine banking. Along with energy and aggression, the team members had to possess high intellectual caliber. Where else would they find it but in the top MBA institutes in the country? In 1986, NYB decided to hire the top 5 students from every IIM in the country. Sundeep, IIMB. Topper was one of those who got an offer. He did not have to think twice before accepting, despite an ordinary pay packet. Smart Sundeep could read the future. His decision was driven by the challenge of doing something new and different, something that hadn't been done in India before, setting up the retail bank franchise of one of the largest retail banks in the world. He was confident that, with the bank's global expertise, it won't be long before it made its presence felt in Indian retail banking, and this, he was sure, would catapult his career into the stratosphere. So in May 1986, Sundeep joined New York International Bank as a management trainee in the newly set up retail banking unit. Monday, 6th May 1986. Sundeep Srivastava walked up to the gate of the NYB office at the busy Nariman Point area in Mumbai's central business district. It was 7:45 in the morning, too early for an induction program for new recruits, which was to start only at 9:30. The bank offices had not even been opened. A towering security guard, rifle in hand, refused to let him in. The guard insisted that the gates could only be opened after an authorized personnel came in, and corporate bankers were not known to be ones who came on time. They normally stumbled in well past the official bank reporting time of 9:00 a.m. Sundeep tried out his best powers of persuasion on the guard, but to no avail. So he decided to make himself comfortable on the bench just outside the building. The bench had been put there for the guards to sit for a while when they came off their duty. No more than 3 people could squeeze into it. He cursed himself for having come so early and turned towards the wooden bench. Sitting on the bench was a young man, roughly the same age as Sundeep. Wearing an oversized coat, he was deeply engrossed in reading a copy of the Economic Times. He had plonked himself right in the middle of the bench, leaving no space on either side for anyone to sit. "Will you move a bit to the side and allow others also to sit?" Sundeep's tone and manner was curt and unnecessarily aggressive. "Yes, of course," said the person sitting on the bench, taking his eyes off the newspaper and looking up for the first time. It was only then that Sundeep noticed the file in the man's hand. It had a letter that looked quite similar to Theon Sundeep had got at the time of his appointment. He quickly realized that the person sitting on the bench had also come to join. NYB. He had in fact reached earlier than Sundeep. The vibhuti mark on his forehead and his well-oiled and combed hair gave him away as someone from the south of the Deccan. "Looks like a Tambram," thought Sundeep. Timbram was slang for Tamilian Brahmins, upper caste people from the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu, belonging to the Brahmin community. Tambrams were known to be highly intelligent, honest, and not so aggressive. Sundeep. My name is Sundeep Srivastava. I'm joining NYB today as a management trainee. I can see from your letter that you have also come in to join today. Have you been waiting here for too long? Sundeep's tone had mellowed down the moment he realized that the guy on the bench was a fellow NYB employee. Hi, my name is Swaminathan. I am also joining NYB as an MT today, said the man sitting on the bench. The tone was typically South Indian. Now Sundeep was sure that here was a Southie. This is my first time in Mumbai. I do not know anyone here. I had no idea how long it would take to reach this place, so I left the hotel at 6:30 a.m. Didn't want to be late on day 1, and they continued to chat. I am Ahmedabad. Passed out this year, said Swaminathan. IMB, same batch, said Sundeep. Where are you from? Delhi. And you? Chennai. Have lived my life there. I can see that. Sundeep smiled. Swaminathan didn't mind and smiled back. He was used to people commenting on his appearance when they met him for the first time. Thus began a legendary partnership in NYB, the fast and aggressive Sundeep versus the mature and sensible Swami. Swaminathan was a merit student at the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad and was acknowledged as the brain of the campus. Swami was also the eldest son in a family of modest means. He was barely 2 years old when he lost his father. His father, a clerk in the Rural Development Ministry, had struggled to feed a family of 4 with his measly salary. With no savings, the small pension was just not enough, and the retirement benefits went into paying off the mortgage on their 1-bedroom house in Mylapore, a middle-income locality in Chennai. Bringing up Swami and his sister was not easy. Their mother struggled, hard to put them through school. She would cook at various Brahmin households and marriages to raise money for their education. Both the children never made her feel that what they had was not enough. Swami was an intelligent and hard-working student who always topped his class. When he reached college, he was lucky to get a scholarship. That was a big relief for his mother because her earnings were just not enough to manage the expenses for both the children. Swami was quick to realize that his mother would not be able to manage the ever-increasing expenses, despite his scholarship. He got himself transferred to an evening college. This gave him an opportunity to work for a few hours during the day and supplement his family income. He started off by keeping accounts for Nalli's, a large chain of sari stores in Chennai. He would spend 9:00 a.m. to 1:00 p.m. every day at the Chettiar's office, and then would attend college from 4 to 9 in the evening. The salary that he earned from Nalli's was just enough to ensure a normal life for the 3 of them. Graduation completed, Swami was faced with a dilemma. Should he continue his studies, or should he give it all up and take up a full-time job to provide for his family? His mother made the decision easier. She insisted that he should study further. She had somehow managed for 19 years, with occasional support from Swami. She didn't want to stumble at the final milestone. She knew that another 2 years and Swami would make it. She had great faith in Swami's commitment and intellect, and was hopeful of him getting a scholarship. True to her expectations, Swami got into the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, the best management institute in the country. At the end of his first term there, when the scholarship list was announced, Swami's name was right on top. He won a full waiver of his tuition fees. When he broke the news to his mother, she couldn't hold back her tears. She wept continuously that whole day. If only Swami's father were around, how he would have swelled with pride. Like Sundeep, NYB was Swami's first job too. He had made it by the whisker. When NYB came out with the first list of 5 hires from IIMA, Swami's name was not there. He was 6th in the merit list at his institute, and NYB was hiring only 5. However, a batchmate of his, Sandeep Runwal, who was 3rd on the merit list, decided to join his father's booming construction business and opted out of campus placements. This piece of good luck made a huge difference to Swami's life. Swami, who was 6th on the merit list, made it as a reserve candidate. It meant a lot to him. Once he got out of the institute, Swami had no money. While at IIMA, he survived on scholarship, and his family survived on the money he had saved earlier. His sister took tuitions and earned some money to supplement their mother's income. Life was not easy in those 2 years, but all along he knew that there was light at the end of the tunnel. Once I finish my MBA, you, Amma, and Ambujam, my dear sister, will live a life of luxury, he had told his mother when he joined IIM. All that was about to come true. Their lives were going to change on joining NYB. There was a 2-month gap between the time Swami finished his MBA at IIMA and the day he was to join NYB. Swami had spent these 2 months doing odd jobs. He saved enough to buy himself a good set of clothes. After all, he was joining a foreign bank. Foreign banks in those days were a designer's paradise. Pinstripe suits, jackets, and exotic ties were in vogue. The dress code prescribed in the appointment letter was business formals. Business formals in banking parlance meant suits or jackets. He couldn't afford one, so he borrowed a jacket from a friend who was 80 pounds heavier than him. That explained the oversized jacket that Sundeep saw Swami wearing on the day they joined NYB. Sundeep and Swami got up together and walked into the bank at 8:45 a.m. This time, the guard didn't stop them. Day 1 of the induction began with Aditya addressing the gathering. Aditya had a reputation of being a tough boss, a banker with a reputation to protect, a person who was heavily focused on the task at hand, and for whom career was everything. New York International Bank had hired 38 new recruits from the premier MBA campuses that year. They had actually hired 40 new recruits, but 2 of them didn't join NYB on the appointed day. All of them were ushered into a conference room that could barely accommodate 25 people. Good morning, everyone. Aditya's voice rang in everyone's ears. New York International Bank welcomes you all to hell. For a minute, there was stunned silence in the classroom, as if Osama had walked into George Bush's meeting in the Oval Room at the White House. Aditya deliberately paused for a minute before he spoke his next line. Yes, gentlemen, all of you have entered hell, he roared. For the next 12 months, as we set out on a journey to launch consumer banking in this country, life will be hell for us. We are going to start a war. And in war, there is no family, and there are no friends. In war, there is only the enemy and the mission. We cannot rest until we win, he roared. Swaminathan was sitting in the first row, listening intently. He was overawed by the tone and the energy in the message. Sundeep was his usual overconfident self, sitting the farthest from the firing line. While Aditya Rao continued elaborating his vision for the bank, Sundeep gently tapped the shoulder of the PYT, pretty young thing, sitting in a row ahead of him. She was Sundeep's batchmate from IIM Bangalore. Kalpana was her name. Kalpana, I think Aditya is kidding. What? With you around, how can this place be hell? Sundeep whispered in Hirar's. Very funny, was all that Kalpana could say to this. Sundeep had always flirted with her through the 2 years at campus, but that was something he did with many women. She never took him seriously, but Sundeep was not the one to give up. Thank you, gentlemen. Together we will build the best consumer bank in this country. Congratulations on joining me here. I hope each one of you hand-picked guys has a wonderful career at New York International Bank. Aditya walked off the podium. Swaminathan, sitting in the first row, clapped till his hands got tired, and he realized that he was the only one still clapping. The chatte session broke for tea. Tea and biscuits were being served in the lobby outside the conference room. Swaminathan was completely overawed by the occasion. Aditya Rao's words kept ringing in his mind. In war, there is only the enemy and the mission. We cannot rest until we win. How true it was. Hadn't this life been a war all along? Survival was his mission, and he was close to achieving it. His hand went inside his coat pocket and out came a handkerchief, which wiped a tear that had sneaked out from the corner of his eye. While Sundeep was having tea during the break, a khaki-clad peon came and handed him a small chit. He opened it and was taken aback. The chit read, "Seem in my cabin after the program, Aditya." Sundeep didn't know what this meant for him. Was it good? Did it spell disaster? He had no clue. His heart started pounding faster. First day in office and the unit head sends out a note to meet him. He had no choice but to wait, wondering what was in store for him. When day 1 of the training program for new recruits entered the last session, Sundeep's heart was hammering away. Kalpana, who was still sitting in front of Sundeep, could sense that something was wrong with him. He had not tried flirting with her in the past 3 hours. Though she would never accept it publicly, she quite liked Sundeep's attention. She turned around and looked at him a couple of times, but Sundeep didn't respond. He was lost in his own thoughts. Thoughts of what was in store for him in Aditya's room. The last few minutes of the day were spent in discussing logistics for the next day and the schedule for the next week. It was a month-long training program, with a week of classroom training and 3 weeks of on-the-job training, in which the new recruits would spend time at the branches of New York International Bank and observe how work gets done. At the end of 1 month, they were to reassemble, assess what they have learned, and list out their preferred areas of work. This would form the basis of their final assignments. That's it for the day, guys. We will meet tomorrow morning at 9 in this very room. Our party tonight will begin at 8:30 p.m. at the ballroom of the Taj Mahal Hotel. Brian Close will address. You please be on time. Formals, please, don't forget your jackets. See you there. The moment the speaker closed the evening, Sundeep dashed out of the room. He was extremely nervous and didn't want to stay back and speak to anyone. He headed for the den of the Don Aditya Rao. On his way, he saw a restroom and ducked into it. He washed his face and freshened up. He wanted to be sure that he was properly groomed before meeting Aditya for the first time. For the first time in his life, Sundeep was nervous before a meeting. It was the fear of the unknown. Why had Aditya called him? This question was gnawing his brain. But he knew one thing for sure. At the end of day 1, if Aditya remembered anyone's name from the list of new recruits, it was his. For good or bad. He didn't know, but he had to capitalize on this. I am here to see Mr. Rao. My name is Sundeep Srivastava. Natasha, Aditya's secretary, looked up when she heard this. Oh yes, Sundeep. He is expecting you. Please wait for a second while I check with him, said Natasha. She was an attractive young woman, surely not older than 21, and looked like someone straight out of college. Natasha got up from her seat and walked into Aditya's room. Sundeep couldn't help noticing how attractive she was. Sundeep surveyed the secretary's workspace. She had a large cubicle. In other organizations, 6 to 8 employees would be seated in the space that she occupied. There was a plush leather sofa, definitely an imported item. He tried guessing the place of origin of the sofa. UK, Germany, probably Greece. He couldn't make up his mind and eventually gave up. If the secretary had this kind of space, he could well imagine the size and furnishings of Aditya's office. Despite his nervousness, he couldn't help being distracted by these thoughts. One day, I will make this my own office. He was already imagining the day when he would walk into this office and call it his own. Aditya will see you in 5 minutes. Can I get you something? Sandeep didn't seem to notice when Natasha returned from Aditya's room. Oh no, thank you. I will just wait here. Natasha looked at Sandeep from the corner of her eyes and was reminded of the conversation that Aditya had with her a few hours back. He had just walked back from the induction program. Natasha, there is a guy in there called Sandeep. Please send a note to him and ask him to see me after the session ends for the day. He had seemed pissed and had walked into his room in a foul mood. He had called her again within the next 3 minutes and crackled over the speakerphone. Before he comes in, can you please get me his CV from their cords? Secretarial work was new for Natasha, but she was a fast learner. She had been in the organization for no more than 30 days and had already become indispensable for Aditya. Knowing Aditya, she was feeling a bit sorry for Sandeep. She was beginning to like him. Swaminathan was looking around for Sandeep after the day's training got over. He was looking for familiar faces in an alien crowd. Being an introvert, it was a challenge for him to go and talk to people on his own. He was standing alone in the corner of the training hall, holding the study material that they had been given. It was 6:45 p.m., and the party was at 8:30. He had nowhere to go. Might as well go through the study material, he thought. He walked back into the classroom and opened the spiral-bound books. They were actually not books, but collations of the Yao, various presentations that the seniors from the organization had made to the group. He was soon completely engrossed in his reading material. Hi, scholar. Swami was startled when he heard a voice from behind. He looked up through his thick glasses and found Kalpana staring down at him. You are Swaminathan, right? I saw your picture on the notice board for our batch. Swami nodded his head. They hadn't spoken to each other despite being in a small group of 38 people. Swami was too shy to initiate a conversation with anyone, and if it was a woman, Swami would stay a mile away. Kalpana, she continued, pointing at herself. You have a whole life to read all this boring stuff. Let's go and get ourselves some fresh air. The building that housed the office of New York International Bank was on Marine Drive, overlooking the sea. The Marine Drive promenade offered a breathtaking view of the whole of South Mumbai. For years, Queen's Necklace, as Marine Drive was otherwise called, was dear to the heart of every Mumbai car. Pick up any magazine on Mumbai and you would find it on the cover. The place is particularly engaging at the cusp when day bids adieu and night takes over. Hordes of people gather to see the spectacle of the lights coming on one by one in a gigantic semicircle, the glittering pearls on the Queen's necklace of lights. Kalpana literally dragged Swami to Marine Drive from the confines of the training room. At IIMA, Swami was rarely seen in the company of women. While all his classmates would actively seek out female company, Swami would be happy in the world of books, spending all his free time in the library. This single-minded dedication had partly to do with his modest means that didn't allow him to spend money on girlfriends like most of his friends. He didn't want to be embarrassed, and so stayed away. Marine Drive was extremely windy. The waves were lashing against the rocky shore. Water was splashing all over the promenade. Kalpana and Swami were chatting and strolling on the path alongside the shore. Swami was a little worried about his borrowed jacket getting wet. He would have to wear it again tomorrow, but he was embarrassed to mention it. He quietly moved as far away from the water as he could without making it obvious to Kalpana. Kalpana, however, saw through his effort. How sweet. She was impressed by his gentle mannerisms. What a nice guy, she thought. Swami, have you had Belpuri? Here, there's a fundo shop on the other side. Let's go there. She figured out a way to take Swami away from the water without embarrassing him. Any place where I can get some copy? Duni asked Swami. Independence Cafe, let's go. She responded spontaneously. How do you know this place so well, Kalpana? Asked Swami. I have lived half my life here, Swami. I have roamed these streets for years. I know every street, every nook and corner. Leave me in any galley, and I will find my way back home. Kalpana was born to Rajasthani parents. Her parents moved to UK when she was very young. They spent a few years there, but finding it difficult to bring up a child in alien surroundings, they moved back to India and set up shop in Mumbai in the early 70s. They opened a small electronics goods store. Their business grew rapidly, and now they had a chain of 12 stores in Mumbai alone. Planning to make their chain a nationwide success, they were also talking to a number of foreign brands for collaboration. Kalpana was their only daughter. Independence Cafe was a small joint just off Marine Drive. It was frequented by college-goers and had a relatively young crowd patronizing it. I had been frequenting this place for over 4 years before moving to Bangalore for my MBA, Kalpana was telling Swami while the two of them walked in. They looked around and settled for a table in the corner, away from the door. I always try and get this seat if it is free. It's away from the door and they're eyesless. Disturbance here. Swami was very happy when he saw the menu. The first item on the menu card was South Indian filter coffee. There were 2 basic things in life, which no South Indian will ever compromise on: the Hindu newspaper and his morning cup of coffee. Ever since he landed in Mumbai, Swami had got neither. A shabbily dressed waiter came to the table. Yes, ma'am. Kalpana did the ordering. 1 cup of strong South Indian filter coffee for sir, and 1 watermelon juice without sugar for me. Anything else, Mom? Kalpana looked at Swami and then back at the waiter. No, that would be it, she said. Swami waited till the waiter was out of earshot. Why no sugar? Are you worried about your sugar levels? Or is it plain calorie consciousness? No, not at all, laughed Kalpana. It is only because sugar spoils the taste of watermelon. I am not calorie conscious at all. You don't need to, you look good anyway. Swami was shocked at himself for having uttered this. Was he flirting with Kalpana? He had never done such a thing in his whole life. Clumsy though he was, Kalpana couldn't resist a smile, and Swami was embarrassed. He didn't know what to say. Kalpana found his embarrassment quite amusing. She was beginning to like his simplicity. Swami came across as an honest, down-to-earth guy. No one makes guys like these nowadays, she thought. How do you like Mumbai, Swami? This was just the beginning of their conversation. They talked about nearly everything under the sun. The weather, their families, their aspirations, their lifestyles, and more. Completely oblivious of the passage of time, they seemed to be enjoying each other's company. Kalpana just happened to glance at her watch and exclaimed, "Oh my God, it's 8:30 p.m. We will have to rush immediately." Kalpana picked up the tab on their way out. Swami couldn't have paid for the 3 rounds of coffee and watermelon juice. By the time they reached the ballroom, it was 8:35 p.m. They were 5 minutes late. Everyone else from their group had arrived. Brian Close, the CEO of the bank in India, was yet to show up. Swami looked around the room trying to find Sandeep, but there was no trace of him. Sandeep was with Aditya Rao. "Aditya will see you now, Sandeep," said Natasha. "I will show you to his room." Sandeep had been waiting outside Aditya's room for quite some time now. The 5 minutes that Natasha had initially indicated stretched to 45 minutes, but Sandeep just had to wait. He could not push his way through here, especially since it concerned Aditya Rao. "Good evening, sir," said Sandeep as he walked into Aditya's room. "Call me Aditya. There are no sirs here." "Sure, Aditya. Take a seat, young man." "Thank you." "Aditya." Rao pulled out Sandeep's CV from the folder in front of him and looked at it, feet nonchalantly placed up on the table. Sandeep was shivering in his pants. What had he done? Sandeep Srivastava, BE, MBA, gold medal at IIM Bangalore. Topper at IIT, good. Army major's son. Mother a doctor. Impressive. Very impressive young man. Summer training at ANZ Grindlays Bank. Quite an impressive pedigree, son. Thank you, sir. But what was definitely not impressive was your behavior in the training session this morning. Sandeep didn't know what to say. He chose to keep quiet, lest he said something wrong. Obviously, something he had done in the morning had pissed off Aditya. "What do you think you were doing, Sandeep? You were extremely distracted on the first day of your job. I noticed that you were also disturbing those who wanted to learn something. This is not acceptable, my friend. It was clear that Aditya was unhappy, but Sundeep was no idiot. He realized that this was his only chance, not only to make up for what he had done, but also to leave a lasting impression on Aditya. If he managed to pull this one through, he would always be on top of mind as far as Aditya was concerned. Sundeep apologized for his behavior. He realized that this was the best thing to do. Aditya, I was slightly excited and didn't realize what I was doing. I am sorry. Aditya too had cooled down since morning and didn't push the case. Sundeep, when you join a new organization, it is very important to understand the organization and imbibe its culture. You should try to know your colleagues, realize their strengths and weaknesses, and focus on the task at hand. This will help you go a long way in any organization. First impressions last long. Always remember this. I will ensure that you do not have a reason to complain, sir. I will take utmost care in the future, responded the ambitious Sundeep to his boss's sermon. Sundeep wanted to leave Aditya with a good feeling. No point getting egoistic with the boss. Aditya had made his point and was a bit relaxed now. Good. Did you get a chance to go through our retail launch strategy? Asked Aditya. The retail launch strategy paper was a document given to all new recruits as a part of their joining kit. I briefly read it in the break. What do you think of it? Aditya was testing Sundeep. Aditya, with due respect, I have a concern on the launch strategy outlined in that document. Sundeep was taking a risk. He had decided to challenge Aditya on this. Aditya looked at him disdainfully. Go on, you have 5 minutes of airtime. Sir, this morning you talked about our launch plans. I remember you mentioned that we were planning to launch credit cards first, before we launch any other product in the retail segment. I have serious doubts about whether this would work in India. That's why I quickly went through the strategy paper during the break to figure out the rationale. Even after reading the document, I'm not convinced. Aditya was listening. Sundeep had his complete attention. Why do you think so? This was Sundeep's chance. He said, there is no doubt that we will be able to launch cards in a big way. We will get customers and will also manage to get them to use our cards. In the process, we will build a huge client base that will be the envy of every other organization. In fact, so huge a customer base that our existing infrastructure and technology will not be able to support it. Our overburdened service delivery system will creak, and we will give away all our goodwill and market to the next player who comes in with better services and systems. We need to launch, in the short run, products and services that are supported by the available technology and systems, and use that to build our brand in their tail space. This will give us some time to set up the required infrastructure. In our country, we have seen a number of nationalized banks launching big products with half-baked processes and failing miserably. We cannot afford to do that. Sir? Aditya, not sir. Sorry, Aditya, if you were to ask me, the first product I would launch in this market would be car loans. It is a product which is backed by security, and there's no large player in the market. If we do it well, it will establish us as a leading player in the market and give us some revenues to play around with. Every automobile manufacturer worth his name will queue up for tie-ups with us. We will get enormous media presence. Every car ad will scream, "Auto loans from New York International Bank." We will ride their campaigns on their expense. They will spend the money, and we will book the loans. This will give us time to set up an infrastructure to sell credit cards. We will then be able to sell cards from every car dealership in the country. Just imagine the distribution capability we would have set up. Imagine a situation where we start selling cards through 800 car dealerships across the country. If each dealership sells 100 cards a month, we would have sold 80,000 cards a month, which will propel us to a different level altogether. All this while, Aditya Rao hadn't moved. His eyes didn't leave Sundeep for a minute. Was this a rookie speaking, or was this an experienced professional? Aditya was completely floored. Aditya believed in debate. He did not propagate a dictatorial approach to business. He was willing to learn, even if it was from a rookie. However, no one had ever come up and told him that he was wrong. When Aditya had set out to build this business, his thinking was exactly the same as Sandeep's. Somewhere down the line, it got diluted and he decided to place his faith in NYB's expertise in cards and other markets. But what Sandeep was saying made eminent sense to him. But what Sandeep did not tell him, and did not intend to, was that his last trimester project at IIMB was on emerging retail banking in India. He had done an extensive study on this subject, and hence knew almost everything that he needed to know. Surprisingly, in his project report, Sandeep had argued that the launch strategy for any retail bank in India had to be driven by its credit cards product. Then why did he change his stance now and say exactly the opposite to Aditya? Well, no one knew. The discussion between the boss and the new recruit went on, and neither was in a mood to stop it. Just then the door opened and Natasha came in. "Aditya, you are getting late for Brian's address at the Taj Mahal Hotel." "Oh yes, I completely forgot about it. Thanks, Natasha." He looked at Sandeep, then back at Natasha, and said, "Will you please call the hotel and get a message delivered to Mr. Close that I and this young guy here will not be attending?" Natasha raised her eyebrows but couldn't question her boss. "Sure, Aditya." Sandeep and Aditya's discussion went on for another 3 hours. By the time they finished, it was well past 10 p.m. "Well done, young man. I must say that your CV is not the only thing that looks impressive. You have an impressive mind, too." On his way out, Aditya looked at Natasha. "Natasha, if you are not doing anything tonight, why don't you take this young guy out for dinner and send me the bill? I have not only made him Miss Brian Close's address, but also his dinner." Before Natasha could respond, Aditya was out of the door, leaving Sandeep behind. "With her, you are stuck with me tonight." Natasha just smiled at this cheeky remark from Sandeep. Wasn't she happy to be stuck with him? "Do you normally leave this late?" Sandeep tried to start a conversation as Natasha was shutting down her computer. "Not every day, but at least twice a week. Aditya normally works late and expects you to work late too. His earlier secretary, Lena, used to work really hard. She would do everything on time but had to leave at 6 every day. She had a problem. Her daughter was in a daycare which would shut down at 6:30 p.m. I have picked up from others that she was the most efficient secretary to have ever worked in New York International Bank. Still, Aditya didn't like her. She resigned about 2 months ago. For Aditya, if you leave before him, you haven't worked hard enough. Sandeep had just learned his first lesson. Do not leave before Aditya does. If that was the culture in New York International Bank, he better follow it. The two of them stepped out to Kalagoda in the fort area of Mumbai for a quick bite. They had an uneventful and quick dinner. Both were tired at the end of a long day. Natasha quite enjoyed Sandeep's company. Sandeep, on the other hand, kept comparing her with Kalpana. Natasha would run Kalpana close on almost every aspect, but Sandeep was biased in favor of Kalpana. By the time they finished their dinner, Sandeep had gathered that Natasha was single and did not have a boyfriend. He could also make out that Natasha Kinda liked him. He invited her to dinner on Saturday evening, which Natasha promised to consider. She couldn't have said yes at the first instance, and Sandeep knew that. Most of the foreign banks in those days had expat CEOs. NYB was no exception. Expat CEOs in the Indian financial services market had a typical problem. They failed to see the Indian market as something different from the developed world they came from. It beat them why a customer in Delhi could not access his account from Mumbai. Technology drove banks in the developed world. In India, everything was pretty much manual. It was difficult for them to understand why it was impolite to push an Indian customer to an ATM for withdrawing cash, when in the US, not to have ATMs was simply inefficient service delivery. They couldn't grasp why, in a country with over 1 billion people, it was difficult to find 30 smart, educated persons. They also got into another usual MNC rut. Converted into dollars, the money an organization would make in India after tremendous struggle would hardly stack up. India would contribute only a minuscule proportion to an MNC's global profits, and hence would be way down in the pecking order. This would hurt the expats' self-esteem, and they would want to go back to their home country. Things have changed a lot since then, but when Swami and Sandeep joined New York International Bank, things were still pretty much gloomy. The hierarchies in every multinational was reminiscent of the days of the Raj. The brown Indians would never get the top post. A foreigner needn't be a top performer to become a CEO in India. An average performer willing to go to India stood a good chance to get the job. India was perceived to be a difficult and hostile country to work in. Punishment posting, it was called. Expats sent to India also got a hardship allowance for having agreed to work here. Brian Close, too, was one such banker. He had joined NYB over 3 decades ago as a teller, the ones who count cash behind the counter whenever you walk into a bank, and was close to retirement. India was his last assignment, and he was due to retire in 9 months. Brian Close's speech was nothing great. He was one of those expat CEOs who begin to think of themselves as rock stars the moment they get the microphone, and think that the Indian employees are suckers who would gleefully lap up any Hindi word thrown at them in an anglicized accent. Namaste. Diama, shrieked Brian Close. He expected the new recruits to jump in ecstasy at his Hindi. That didn't happen. Still, he went on for over 45 minutes, without conviction. When he stepped off the podium, there was a thunderous applause. One thing was not clear, though. Did the new recruits applaud him for a fabulous speech, or were they simply relieved that the torture had ended? Brian thought it was the former, while the look on the faces of Swami and Kalpana made one believe that it was definitely the latter. Kalpana was glued to Swami for almost the entire evening. She had begun to admire him. Swami was a humble human being, with a deep intellect and a clear thought process. When Brian came and met them after the address, Kalpana was impressed by the way in which Swami spoke with him. Crisp, concise, clear, and, most important, honest. She couldn't help comparing him with the aggressive, arrogant, and brash Sandeep. Swami clearly stood out. On her way home, Kalpana couldn't stop thinking about Swami and Sandeep. Natasha, too, was lost in thoughts, but she had only Sandeep on her mind.